Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into the ArtGibbs Sports Business Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. And today we're going to talk about the lovable losers, the Chicago Cubs, and why it might have been very profitable for them to lose for so many years. Maybe even more profitable than winning. We dive into that here in this episode. All right, so a lot of this is going to be based on the scorecasting book. It's a great book. We've used it before. I'll put a link in the description below. And they've got some details as far as the exact numbers on attendance and some of the correlation and that kind of stuff. So if you're interested in finding out some of their exact numbers, that's going to be the scorecasting book. It's towards the end of the book, chapters 28, etc. And I'll post that link below. But we're going to talk a little bit more about the theory, kind of the basis for some of that in the book, and just give some explanation in that sense. Okay, so the Chicago Cubs, everyone knows the story from like 1909 to all the way, over 100 years they didn't win the championship. And there's the great remark, everybody's entitled to a bad century, etc. But one of the things that's brought up in the scorecasting book that we're going to expand upon here is the idea of incentives. So incentivized to lose. It's not incentivized to lose like directly or anything like that. It's just the idea that it's not the same profit and loss. It's not the same fan reaction, etc. if you lose or if you happen to lose. And of course, everybody wants to win, but the difference between winning and losing in this type of a competitive league is all of the little things, the coming early, the staying late, all of that kind of stuff. And in the Cubs case, that structure of incentives just might not have been there. So we'll discuss that. So the Cubs didn't win, and in not winning, they were extremely financially rewarded. The team value went up every year. It went up even more when they lost. It had the whole lovable losers mentality, which we kind of referenced in the intro. And there were groups literally formed around being losers and kind of identifying with that and commiserating with one another, et cetera, et cetera. And so what are some of the main reasons for that? And how do we know that? So one of the ways is attendance. The attendance for the Cubs did not waver when they lost. It was almost unaffected when they lost. So, i.e., like if they had a great season versus if they had a bad season, the attendance didn't vary that much, if at all. Whereas their counterpart, the White Sox, if they had a bad season or weren't doing well in the field, their attendance would be kind of through the floor. The Cubs many times were near the top, at or near the top of the league in attendance, even though they hadn't won in 100 years and really hadn't been that competitive through like a winning percentage type scenario. So why was this, right? Like every franchise would love to be able to not win and still do well and still gain a lot of value and that kind of stuff. And one of the things we've discussed on here before is something like the Dallas Cowboys, right? And the Dallas Cowboys are basically, they're the most valuable franchise in pro sports. They're the most valuable NFL team, but they don't win. They're not the top team in terms of winning, et cetera. And we've talked about some of the reasons for that, some of the box seat pricing and all of that kind of stuff. But really the essence of it is brand. And the Dallas Cowboys had these years of success in the past, and so did the Cubs when they, 1908, everyone says, oh, last time they won was 1908. Well, in 1908, they had won several straight in a row, and they are literally, they're in Chicago. They're in a big city, in a huge market, a very baseball-centric market from the very beginning, and had this backdrop of this great success. So that helps with the brand. Another thing is that this P.K. Wrigley, so the son of the Wrigley that made the chewing gum, P.K. Wrigley realized there's got to be a way to make the game and the game day experience extremely fun and have it not all be about winning and losing. So he's actually the one that put the ivy on the wall, and he wanted to create an environment where people could come out in the middle of the day, enjoy a baseball game, enjoy peanuts, enjoy popcorn, enjoy beer, and not really be concerned with the team winning or not. And so part of the brand and part of the culture of the Cubs has been this stadium and the stadium environment, etc. Another thing that they mention in this book, the scorecasting book, is that the price of tickets, the ticket price, was sort of didn't affect the attendance to the games, and the franchise had some of the highest ticket prices across the entire Major League Baseball, and yet as they would raise ticket prices, and they raised them at a higher clip than every other team, 67% raised versus 40, from a period of 1990 to 2009. Even though they raised them at a higher clip than the other teams and weren't winning, they were still running an attendance of over 90%. But one of the things that did affect the attendance was beer prices. So the beer prices, if they went up, attendance would go down. So Wrigley Field had some of the lowest beer prices and highest ticket prices of any Major League team. It also had some of the highest value of any Major League Baseball team. They could charge a lot for the tickets. They didn't have a high payroll, and they were constantly selling out the stadium, making for a very profitable endeavor. Now, another, we mentioned the Dallas Cowboys. Another franchise in major pro sports was the Los Angeles Lakers. Now, obviously, they have a much bigger winning history than the Chicago Cubs. I mean, at least at this time. So this is pre their resurgence, and we'll talk about why that was in a minute. But the Lakers also had these sort of ideas of, let's create an experience that's more than just the product on the court. Now, that has helped them sell more tickets, have higher ticket prices, et cetera, et cetera. They turned down the lights in the stadium. The owner was very into this was a show. He wanted to make it a show, make it prime time, make it for Los Angeles, which is an entertainment city. And so even with the Clippers in town, still a big market, the Lakers are worth far more than them, and the ticket prices are higher, et cetera, et cetera. Now, obviously, they have a lot more success than the Clippers and a huge championship winning history. But it's just of note that it wasn't just, it's sort of a cart before the horse, right? Like, they've had the championship history, but they also realize they want to make this a primetime type event and a primetime type atmosphere. And that primetime type atmosphere drives ticket prices, drives notoriety, drives jersey sales, et cetera, and builds the brand. So they have the brand where they have winning as a base, then also they have this kind of showtime atmosphere and game day experience that's very different. Same with the Cubs. It was, you go to Wrigley Field, you go to Wrigleyville, you have beer, you have peanuts, you have hot dogs, you enjoy the game. It's more about that in the friendly confines, in the, wall of ivy and all of that kind of stuff. And I will say too, the attendance and the attendance numbers that they had at Wrigley Field, which really were kind of at the top of the league, did not even include all of the sort of enterprising people around that had all the rooftop seating, etc. They didn't even include that, and they were still at the top of those numbers. Now, what changed? What changed to take the Cubs from the lovable losers to champions? Well, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's a focus on all of the little things that make you win, all of the little things that make you want to win, that make you put the extra effort, that make you come early and stay late and all of that kind of stuff. When the Ricketts family took over after the Chicago Tribune situation, the Chicago Tribune had, owned the Cubs as, among other things, and Sam Zell, the real estate tycoon, basically, who runs Equity Commonwealth REIT, among other business dealing. He came in and purchased the Tribune, and one of his first orders of business was kind of creating a deal to sell the Cubs. And he sold it to the Ricketts family, along with, some of the TV deals that they had and that kind of stuff. So when the Ricketts family came in, they made some changes. So one of the things they did was they actually removed candy from the locker room, got health food in there, of course, signed Theo Epstein to run the team and Joe Madden to be the coach. And ultimately that crew and Theo Epstein and Madden, Hall of Fame type talents in the sport, but they went out and the Cubs ownership made a conscious effort of, we are going to spend this money, top dollar, bring these people in, and make this concerted effort to win and to focus on scouting and focus on the development of the minor leagues and all of these little things. As we mentioned, all of this sort of come early and leave late, spend that extra dollar, push, that eventually got them over the hump. And quite honestly, in the scheme of things, got them over the hump pretty quick. They had the resources. They weren't unlucky. There was nothing like that. There was just, they weren't putting themselves in a position to make it to the World Series and then to win said World Series. And a lot of that 100+ year drought was most likely driven by incentives. The team went up in value faster than the rest of the league. The team was constantly valued in the top 5 of all baseball franchises, right up at the top of the league in attendance. And yet they knew their customer. They knew the beer prices were low. They leaned into the lovable loser, and it worked for them. It really worked for them. Even though they weren't winning, it worked tremendously from a business perspective for them. They focused on the game day experience. They leaned into the lovable losers. Like I said, there were many people that, commiserated in that sense. And financially, it was an extremely beneficial time, even though on the field they weren't winning. Now, of course, that's changed. They've gotten the monkey off their back. But again, it wasn't like they were unlucky in the first place. Their incentives just weren't aligned and weren't the same as these other teams. And they had a brand that allowed them to profit tremendously, even in losing. All right, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. And have a great day. Again, please like, subscribe. ArtGibbs Sports Business Podcast on YouTube. We're available on Spotify and Stitcher and Apple Podcasts and all of that stuff. Please go there as well and subscribe, like. And we've got a couple great interviews coming up, so stay tuned for those. Again, make sure you got notifications set so you can get those coming through. Thank you.